Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And I think we'll see more people joining us, but this session is being recorded. So I think even if folks miss anything, we'll be able to go back and watch it again. And greetings from the Climate Change Media Hub at the Asian College of Journalism. This is an initiative supported by the Interlink Academy, Germany. My name is Dharmesha. I am a mentor at the Media Hub, Climate Change Media Hub, for the Journalist Fellowship Program. And I'm based in India. And I focus mostly on climate policy and health policy. And today's session, we will explore the climate disinformation and its real world impacts on public perception, policy, accountability, highlighting what journalists should keep in mind while reporting. When it comes to reporting in the age of climate disinformation, I just want to start with a simple observation that in India, climate journalism is both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. On the one hand, we see a lot of reporting on climate-linked events, heat waves, floods, air pollution, agrarian distress. There's a lot of information now, reporting out there and widespread reporting out there on these topics. These are daily headlines. But on the other hand, climate as a system, as a story about power, economics, and long-term change is still treated as a very niche beat, and very few reporters actually cover it from that perspective. There's a real tension here for journalists. Many of you are already reporting on climate impacts, Indian reporters, especially focusing on environmental issues, but often without the space and tools and the consistency that's required to join the dots between these events and larger climate story that's unfolding globally. And there's all these interconnections and systems perspective that's required sometimes. And then within this, there is a whole disinformation. The issue of disinformation especially becomes very powerful. And in the Indian context specifically, the climate disinformation rarely shows up outright as denial. But there are very subtle ways in which this disinformation becomes effective. And we see and then we hear from two experts today who will give us more insights into identifying this. How do you identify selective storytelling? How do you see when accountability shifted away from the systems onto specific siloed individual problems? So I think that is going to be a very big takeaway from today's discussion. So challenge today is not just about identifying what is false, it is also about understanding how narratives are shaped, repeated, and made to feel like common sense, and how do we look beyond that. So in this, we one question we want to ask ourselves is, how do journalists retain their agency in this environment? And this is what I think will also be covered by Dr. Cornelia in her discussion. She'll be bringing out a lot of those nuances. But what we hope to explore today through both conceptual insights and practical reflections through this discussion is something that will help us avoid the pitfalls of disinformation, and also help our audiences or readers or viewers make sense of complex and contested realities that we are faced with today. So with that, I will first pass it on to Dr. Cornelia, and we have two speakers today, Dr. Cornelia and Dr. Grant Ennis, who will share their insights and perspectives. Dr. Cornelia Walter is a humanitarian leader with 20 plus years of experience at the UN, driving social change. Cornelia is an associate professor at the Institute of Global Strategy and Competitiveness and a senior fellow at the Sunway Center for Planetary Health in Malaysia, and works with the United Nations in Morocco on national blueprints for pro-social AI. She's affiliated with the Wharton's Neuroscience Initiative and the Wharton's McNulty Leadership Center at the University of Pennsylvania as a senior fellow. She's also a senior fellow at the Harvard Learning and Innovation Lab, the Center for International Governance, Innovation, and an advisor at the European Policy Center. Her overall focus is on pioneering research on hybrid intelligence and pro-social AI through the Global POSE Alliance to build agency amid AI for all. Cornelia is a contributor to the Forbes and Psychology Today. Her seventh book will be published in May 2026, looking at AI for AI, artificial intelligence for inspired action. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Cornelia, and then we'll hear from Grant after that.
Thank you very much, Dharmesh. I'm think for the sake of time, I'm going straight to the presentation. It's great to meet you all. If there are any questions, please do not hesitate to interrupt me. Otherwise, I think we have a Q&A at the end. With that, so this is the snapshot of everything that I'm going to say. Natural intelligence is the cause of artificial intelligence, and we need to avoid that it becomes its consequence, and individual change is the cause and consequence of social change. That leads us in a hybrid era to a big question: how can we harness AI to bring out the best in and for people and planet? And I would argue we're currently navigating a very dangerous transition where we have passed the stage of experimentation. We're deeply into the era of integration. We're not far away from reliance, and maybe in a not too far off future, full-blown addiction. And you can think about yourself where you would place yourself right now in your interplay with your AI tools. I've spoken to quite a wide range of people in various cultures and sectors, and people who told me 6 months ago that they would never delegate an email, all of a sudden, they can't imagine sitting down and starting it from scratch. So it's a very subtle transition, and we find ourselves adapting to a new normal. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. So we need to keep on our own toes and observe ourselves, especially when it comes to information and misinformation. Because agency decay is the cause and consequence of a lethal cognitive cognate. So placing that in the context of journalism, why is it twice dangerous? We're becoming more and more willing to accept something as trustworthy that might be questionable. Because think about yourself, what feels trustworthy? It's the plausibility, but also it's the emotional triggers of what we take in, be that visual, be that text. It's the volume of repetition. The more often you hear something, there's this old saying, familiarity breeds liking. It's the professionality of the tone and language. And it's also decision fatigue. If you hear something ever and again, and it seems so plausible, well, at some point you just accept it. Now, with AI, not only we are flooded with highly professional, seemingly very plausible content, but also it's so much and it's so often that it outpaces our ability to really verify, both personally but also professionally. And you might know that from your own research, it's becoming increasingly indistinguishable from really verified sources. And there's the 24/7 nudging, which started with social media, but which more and more also other platforms are adopting. So misleading content that is everywhere is the new normal. And in that context, it's important to remember the Janus phase of AI, which is internally, if we think about ourselves, a tool for ease and efficiency, which is positive. But then it comes with the flip side of agency decay, which makes us more easily victim of false information. On the external side of things, it can be a catalyst of positive change, but it also has a gigantic environmental footprint. And Agent CDK is just the point of departure for a whole ABCD of AI issues that are not talked about so much, and where especially journalism in the hybrid age can play a very important role. Bond erosion, we're all very willingly accepting that we now have this always available friend in the pocket who tells us how marvelous and fantastic we are. And maybe in a not too far a future, will be embodied in a robot that looks just like our dream partner. Now, why bother with another human being? I'm polemic here, but it's not so science fiction as it seemed 5 years ago. The Sea of Climate conundrum. You're reporting in the space of climate change. AI might seem free, but de facto, it has a really large footprint when it comes to energy consumption, when it comes to land occupation by data centers, when it comes to the water required to cool down these data centers. So nothing is as free as it seems. And finally, the D of divided society. Because even though there are millions and millions of people who are excited about AI, or generative AI in particular, there's still a couple of billion people who are struggling to have enough water, clean food, clean water, enough food, and safe housing. So they are the ones who need dramatic change the most, and they're the most unlikely to benefit from it. And all of this placed in the bigger picture, there are 4 tendencies that are currently co-evolving with Agent CDK at the micro level. The mainstreaming of AI by institutions, public, private, and academia. The pursuit of AI supremacy, both by the AI giants, but also by governments, because more and more AI supremacy is considered as equal to geopolitical supremacy. And finally, at the meta level, the crossing of ever more planetary boundaries, with 7 out of 9 now passed with irreversible damages. Now, these 4 phenomena seem disconnected, but de facto, they are mutually accelerating each other. So if we look at the human being as a composition of twice 4 dimensions, we could say there is aspirations, emotions, thoughts, and sensations at the individual level, and the individual as part of a community, a country, and a planet at the collective level. I call that the natural intelligence. AI is now influencing each of these dimensions and their interplays. And we need to be aware of that AI is not happening in a vacuum, and neither do we. There is an ongoing dynamic that is shaping how we see and think about the world. So if we want to take that now into a more positive light, then there is a countermeasure to Agent CDK, which is pro-social AI via agency amidst AI, based on hybrid intelligence via double literacy. What do I mean? Pro-social AI, if you look at the pyramid of intelligence, sits between AI for good, so the use of traditional AI for positive purposes, and AI for IA, artificial intelligence for inspired action, which is the use of deliberately configured social AI for particularly bringing out the best in and for people and planet. So pro-social AI refers to AI systems that are tailored, trained, tested, and targeted to bring out the best in and for people and planet. And it makes the whole question of ethical AI, which we have all heard about, and which is one of those topics that you ask 10 people and you get 11 answers, something that is very concrete, because you have the 4T of the how the tool is designed, tailored, trained, tested, targeted, with the 4P of the quadruple bottom line. So purpose, people, profit, planet. The why do we actually need the AI in this particular context? This is what the dashboard looks like. We're not going to talk more about it, but it might be a tool that is also useful when you think about the AI tools in your own use cases. And there are quite a number of articles about that now, so happy to share. Now, if we wrap up with the logical chain of this, pro-social AI is based on the understanding that AI is neutral, it's a mean to an end, and the outcomes at the end of the day depend on people and systems. It's still the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, or values in, values out. Those choices depend on us, and that depends on agency, which is the ability and volition to act, combined with the perception of that ability. But for that, we need to be aware of the implications that AI has on ourselves and on our environment, and to feel accountable for the outcomes. In a hybrid era that requires HI, hybrid intelligence, which arises from the complementarity of natural and artificial intelligence. And that requires double literacy, which encompasses, on the one hand, human literacy, a holistic understanding of self and society, people and planet, and algorithmic literacy, the what, why, and how of AI, which is far more than just AI literacy. Because to be proactive in a hybrid era, we require a 360-degree understanding of life, online and off-screen. So, as a practical takeaway for you as journalists, you might want to adopt those 4 A's with awareness, tag every AI-assisted step in your workflow, appreciation, build a 30-second pause into your verification looping, acceptance, just accept that neither of us is perfect, and consider the I don't know as a professional response. And finally, the A of accountability. AI accelerates, but you as a journalist still answer for accuracy. And that might be some useful standards for writing in the AI era, which is, do you know when not to use AI? Are the verification steps clear and specific in your news outlet? And if not, then maybe now is the time to ask, does your own workflow allow to slow pace at key points? What deep fake detection tools do you use? Do you have any? Are you aware of your journal's policy on AI overall? The bottom line, efficiency without verification, at some point, credibility collapses. And at the end of the day, and I know I'm running out of time, thought leadership needs trust. So investing in your agency amidst AI is a step towards protecting information integrity and to promote democracy. Because information in the new normal of disinformation requires integrity more than ever before. So, personal takeaway, why do you use AI? Who are you without it? Where's the complementarity of your AI and NI? And what will you never delegate? Aspire to be curious, upgrade yourself, choose to be a champion, and make it happen. And maybe write an email to your future self. What do you want this future version to have done? Thinking back about today and after what you just heard and what you're going to hear from Grant, maybe send yourself a brief note and send it to be delivered 1 year from now. What's your takeaway? Because everything is connected, and how we choose to engage with AI shapes whether it becomes a force for stronger communities or not. So, are we ready to build an algorithmic architecture that is pro-social today, together? Well, if ever any of these questions resonate, and if you're interested in more, then here there are some links, and also there's a WhatsApp group in case you want more and regular information about that. And with that, I'm handing it over to Grant, unless there are any burning questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cornelia. And I think the last slide, especially, I think you can share it with us so we can also put it on our the resources on our follow-up emails. We will come to the questions as well in about I think we have about 15 minutes for Grant as well, 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll quickly go on to Grant, and then we'll try to keep the Q&A session. We'll allocate as much time as possible to the Q&A session. I just wanted to also quickly invite and introduce Grant. Grant is a lecturer at Monash University with over 20 years of experience across international affairs, public health, complex emergencies, and environmental action. He's the author of the book Dark PR, How Corporate Disinformation Undermines Our Health and the Environment, which traces how industries have historically shaped public narratives to delay accountability and protect their interests. His work is particularly useful for understanding how disinformation is not accidental, but is often strategic, structured, and deeply embedded in systems of power. We are very glad to have him with us today for this special session. Grant, I'll pass it on to you. I see your screen already. Okay, take it away.
Thanks for the kind introduction, Dharmesh, and really great to be here with you all. And Cornelia, wonderful to be following up after your presentation. Hope I can do as well as you did. It was really fascinating. So I'm really pleased to be talking to a group of reporters today, as the book that I wrote was really aimed at reporters and the people that work in media framing, as well as activists and organizers. I believe Dharmesh sent a copy of the PDF to everyone, or if he hasn't already, he will, so that you all can see the references behind the ideas that I'm going to present today. I'm going to go rather fast, so if you're interested in any of the sources, you can consult with the PDF of the book itself, or just email me, contact me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, as you like. Oops. Just to start, we're talking about global warming today, and I think I want to establish from the very beginning, global warming is not something just happening. We are paying for it. Our governments are financing global warming. Every year we are subsidizing fossil fuels through either tax subsidies or direct subsidies or other forms of subsidization. The International Monetary Fund calculates that we're already spending over $7 trillion per year. I don't know how much that would be in Indian rupees, but I imagine the number would be an enormous number of zeros. It's difficult to conceptualize how big $7 trillion is. If you're interested in looking at these numbers and how this is calculated, you can go to the IMF's website and download the Excel spreadsheet. You'll be able to then see how this breaks down for India or for any country in Asia or globally. The spreadsheet looks like the image on the right-hand corner here. The way that subsidies work is that either you make it cheaper for industry because of tax breaks or some kind of other thing, or you give the industry money directly, and that leads to prices going down. You decrease the price through subsidies, consumption goes up, greenhouse emissions goes up, and then global warming also increases. So these subsidies are killing us. We are paying large industries to kill us and to destroy our planet. Here is the breakdown for Asian countries and a couple of other countries, just so you can see. According to the IMF in 2025, India paid $414 billion. If anybody would like to type into the chat for me how much that is in Indian rupees, I'd be very curious. It's an enormous amount of money. This is not something secret or nefarious or hidden. We all have documented fossil fuel subsidies and their role in contributing to global warming for a very long time. And every year since I was born, I believe, fossil fuel subsidies have gone up. So effectively, my entire lifetime, we have done nothing for global warming. The subsidies for fossil fuels have only increased year after year after year. That was a protest in, I believe, Switzerland by an organization called Drop Fossil Fuel Subsidies. You do have people working to stop this, but they don't get enough media attention. And we're not organizing globally enough to end this.
Greta Thunberg.
So I like to start with this quote by Mark Twain, which is quite a good one. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So we're going to cover a lot of things today that might be things you thought you knew that are just not true. The fun thing about this quote is people are always talking about this Mark Twain quote, and it's unlikely he actually said it. It's also equally fake news, but I think with that caveat, it's quite a fun quote. So one of the problems we face is that the institutions that we trust to tell us what's happening with global warming are being funded by the people that are causing global warming and profiting from these fossil fuel subsidies. Universities around the world are taking money from the fossil fuel industry, automobile industry, other industries which are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions through their normal day-to-day work. Secondly, the organizations that we trust to help us to navigate this world that we would hope that would be not having conflicts of industry are also taking money from industry. So Sierra Club took $26 million from fossil fuel industry. Friends of the Earth was founded by money from a fossil fuel industry. The World Wildlife Fund is famously taking tons and tons of money from industry. This is a big problem. The information that we have on hand coming from all of these NGOs and from university researchers is being sponsored. I mean, not all of it, of course, but a large amount of it is being sponsored by the people that make money from a dying planet. And so when these universities, and the researchers working in them and the organizations are promoting things through their research to solve global warming that aren't really very effective, that don't challenge fossil fuel subsidies, they're promoting less effective stuff and diluting support for more effective stuff. Politics is zero sum. So people either vote yes or no at the end of the day. A policy happens or doesn't happen. Global warming goes up or it doesn't go up. So you can't be promoting less effective stuff in combination with stuff that works. That you'll just ruin your entire effort to bring together people to really make change. So a lot of this media framing that you all are working in every day is the result of is the cause of why we're not acting on these fossil fuel subsidies. Every day we're reporting on the news, every day advertising is happening, and all during this time, the way that people think about global warming is being shaped, and people are either acting or not acting, and government is either acting or not acting. And right now, the way that global warming is being framed, we're not acting. So that's the whole point of my book is about global warming, road death, and diabetes, and the industries that cause them, and how those industries are framing debates. So I'm just going to go through a very quick exercise in framing. So if you all just think for a second, what is the number of the parking spot in the car that's being covered up by the car? Just take 2 seconds to try and think through that question. What if we frame the question a little differently? Now is it more clear? Now it's quite obvious, right? Framing can happen visually like this. It can happen through narratives. So as Dharmesh mentioned, climate change disinformation is much more than just denialism. That's only the beginning. So we're going to go through what I call the 9 devious frames, and these frames apply to all issues, but I use them in my book to go over global warming, diabetes, and road death. Um, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. I don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to make sure I cover everything. I'll try and send the link to the slides if that will be helpful later for people to have more of a reference. But basically, everything I'm covering today is discussed at length in the book. So the first frame of denialism, the first way that industry tries to frame the debate on global warming is to just say, no big deal, basically. It's not happening. So this is very classically, the classic example of this is the tobacco industry in the 60s saying doubt is our product. We want to like muddle the science, not muddle what's going on in people's minds. But you also have it very clearly in global warming. Like here's Exxon on the left saying, you know, the science on global warming, we don't really know. You know, you have the president of the fossil fuel company who was the chair of the COP28, you know, saying there's no science behind the need to phase out fossil fuels. They're saying like there's no evidence, this kind of denialism. This is the beginning. This is the stuff that I hope, while it should get covered, we've go past very quickly. I hope in your reporting in the future, you don't stick on denialism too much, and I'm not going to focus on it more today. You then have post-denialism. All of these frames will become more complex, more sophisticated as we go along. They're building on one after the next. So this is when industry says like beer is good for you, or sugar will help you lose weight, or doctors say you should smoke more cigarettes, or in the case of
this can provide endless possibilities. It can create light and jobs, delivering $6 billion in wages for Australians. It produces steel and powers our homes, as well as our economy, injecting $40 billion each year, and it can now reduce its emissions by up to 40%. It's coal. Isn't it amazing what this little black rock can do? Authorised G. Evans, Canberra.
That was the
Nope.
That was the Australian Coal Association. It has a more formal name, saying coal is amazing. That's post-denialism.
No one disputes.
The next video is essentially the Minister of the Environment of the United States, energy. I'll have to look it up. Scott Pruitt is his name, and he's talking about how global warming will make the world better. I'll play the clip really quickly.
No one disputes the climate is changing. We see that that's constant. We obviously contribute to it. We live in the climate, right? So our activity contributes to the climate changing to a certain degree. Now, measuring that with precision, Gerard, I think is more challenging than is let on at times. Yeah. But I think the bigger question is what you ask at the very end. Is it an existential threat? Is it something that is unsustainable? Or what kind of effect or harm is this going to have? I mean, we know that humans have most flourished during times of what? Warming trends. I mean, so I think
So he's saying humans will flourish more during times of warming. Now the video goes on a little bit more. It's very scary to hear that kind of thing from somebody so high profile. But he's saying that the world will be a better place because of global warming. The next frame is normalization. And this one, I have a video, but I'm not gonna play it because there's no time. But the idea here is that instead of saying global warming, there was polling in the 1990s that showed that if you call it climate change, people will protest less. And that people will protest more if you call it global warming. So I hope that we all call it global warming from here on out. It's a little bit hard because the campaign to call it climate change was so successful. But we know from the research on framing that calling it global warming is a much more effective term in getting people organized and mobilized to actually take action on climate and global warming.
With huge funding
So then just to re-emphasize, now I'm going to talk about some nonsensical solutions or devious frames that promote some kind of solution or another that's convenient for industry. And these are fake solutions. So when you promote fake solutions that don't work, you dilute support for what does. So I hope your reporting today will never suggest any of these false solutions ever again. So the first one I call the category I call silver boomerangs, but in this case it's energy efficiency. So anytime you hear about electric cars, more efficient energy sources, um, lower energy consumption, whatever, that is a devious frame. That is not something that we think that will actually reduce global warming. To stop global warming, we have to stop things that lead to greenhouse gas emissions. The sources for this are in the book. I can also help if anybody needs more sources on this. The main kind of theoretical principle here is something called Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox is something from the 1890s where this guy named Stanley Jevons found that if you make coal power plants more efficient, you won't see a decrease in the use of power. You'll see an increase. So in the end, you have a kind of homeostasis with the use of power that as the equipment becomes more efficient, people use those efficiency gains as a performance benefit rather than to save costs on energy. And for me, a good example of this is the way that refrigerators over time have gotten bigger. So as refrigerators have gotten more and more efficient, you might have noticed that the refrigerator in your grandparents' house or your parents' house was smaller. And now we have much larger and larger refrigerators as that technology has become more efficient. Or people with more fuel efficient vehicles drive them further. This is the Jevons paradox, and this is what we see from energy efficiency. So I think if anytime anybody says energy efficiency to you, if you could yell back in chorus, fossil fuel subsidies, I think that would be a quite appropriate thing to do. We need to be focusing on the causes of global warming, which is the fact that we are paying for it. Let's see. This next frame I call the magic frame. And in the case of global warming, I think the best example is carbon capture storage. This is a fake thing. I'm not going to indulge even a little bit of time in it. If you'd like to know more, you can Google all the many reports Dharmesh and our colleagues have written about this over the years. Carbon capture storage is not real. It's being promoted around the world by industry, and the people being supported by industry that work in government are repeating industry talking points. It's very sad. It's a fake thing. Greenpeace calls it the carbon capture scam. I think that's a great way of framing it. Here's the biggest carbon capture removal plant in the world opened, and it'll negate 3 seconds of annual global emissions. Such nonsense. The next frame is the treatment frame. And in the case of global warming, that's climate adaptation. We need to adapt to global warming. There's no doubt. But in media framing, if we promote adaptation and what they call mitigation or prevention at the same time, we will reduce support for prevention. We will reduce support for mitigation. So if you're reporting on global warming and don't have any direct need to be talking about adaptation, don't. Focus on stopping global warming before it occurs. You want the sea level not to rise more than you want to deal with the rising. You know, it's much better that the problem never occurs than you deal with it after. The research on this, again, is quoted in the book. There's a lot of good studies on this. I published a piece in the Journal of the American Metallurgical Association last week about how this applies to nutrition as well. We know this framing effect occurs. If you promote the treatment of an illness, people support less the prevention of that illness. If you promote the treatment or adaptation to global warming, people support less the prevention of global warming. So the next frame that's commonly used is something called victim blaming, or keeping the focus on the individual. And this comes in a number of ways. So we know, for example, from the research on women empowerment, that if you tell women, just stand up for yourself, just lean in, women that have been exposed to that messaging are less likely to support laws like increases in equal pay, different kinds of laws that would support equity of gender. And the same is true across a range of issues. Anytime you promote free will or agency or voluntary actions, people support government action less. You promote recycling, you promote individual action, the carbon footprint, people will support action on global warming less. And the fact of the matter is that global warming the solution to global warming of the carbon footprint was something that was promoted by industry. It was promoted by British Petroleum. And we know that these campaigns to get people to reduce their carbon footprint, quote unquote carbon footprint, they don't work. They've been wildly promoted by industry for years and years and years. They don't lead to reductions in energy. So this
What's that?
carbon label campaigns, educating people is a very famous industry action. Do not support education for global warming unless the education is related to organizing to change government policy around global warming. Education, labels, mass media campaigns, they don't change people's behavior to reduce energy consumption. Let's see. Maybe I'm gonna.
That whole idea of you have to be a saint first and then be political is also a way of making sure that a lot of people are not political.
You all know who she is. What the idea there is that you don't need to first reduce your carbon footprint before you can make claims that the government needs to act. That's a famous industry trope. It's whataboutism. Don't fall for it. We live in the economy that we live in. You know, if you need to take a flight, you need to take a flight. You don't need to reduce your carbon footprint before you fight for political change, before you organize for political action. Last two frames. Knotted web frame. This is the idea that global warming is complex, or it's systemic, or it's circular, or there's a web. Industry loves this kind of language. Don't repeat it. Don't say complexity ever again if you can avoid it. Don't say circular. Use the word structural. Talk about fossil fuel solutions. Go up fossil fuel subsidies. Go upstream. But we have really good research to show that when you say things are complex, you dilute political will for action. It's an unhelpful framing that is wildly used by industry. If you want, you can buy a circular Mercedes now, for example. I mean, industry loves this stuff. Here you can see climate change is complex, according to ExxonMobil. Don't vote for the Kyoto protocols. Here's your circular Mercedes. Multifactorial, the last frame, and I'll give the floor back to Dharmesh, and I think we'll go into questions. This is when people say we need a combination of these solutions. We need all of the above. And this framing is used across industries, again, multifactorialism, and it's been promoted wildly by tobacco industry and by British Petroleum, especially. British Petroleum's campaign for all of the above, which is now on the screen, is quite famous. You'll hear this all the time. The solution to global warming is a package of interventions, a combination of solutions. So I will now give back the floor to Dharmesh, and thank you all for your time. I'll be looking forward to any questions. Back to you, Dharmesh. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Grant. And I think both these sessions could be like, individual, like dedicated topics of discussion. And I hope we can do that in the future as well, because certainly 1 hour is not a justified time for this deep dives that both of you have offered today. So we already have questions in the chat, a couple of them, and please keep them coming, and also take the floor if you want to ask the question directly. So first question we have is from Jennifer Kishan. Could you suggest any good beginners deepfake detecting tools that we could use as journalists or must have right now? I don't know if if I think this is for Dr. Cornelia specifically, since you spoke about deepfakes, are you aware of any tools, or can you point journalists in that direction? You're muted, Dr. Cornelia.
So there are no particular ones that would come to my mind, because I have been disappointed with several of those that are specifically for deepfake detection. So ironically, I would say the mainstream platforms, like the one of OpenAI and Claude, they are both the ones that are producing the fakes, but also the ones that can help you detect them. So I would say go with those, because in case of doubt, they are the ones that are the most updated.
Okay. It's sort of a paradox there with the guys who creating the problem are also giving us a solution there. So the second question is, I think, for Grant, how does solutions journalism fit into the framework of global warming for Grant Dennis? Does it take away from the core issue of reducing fossil fuels, ending subsidies, etc., as it focuses more on adaptation? It's from Meena Menon.
Thanks, Mina. I think that I'm not sure what quote unquote solutions journalism is, but I'll do my best to kind of interpret the question and let me know if you think I could elaborate more. There's a challenge that humans face when we look at solutions, that we are biased towards what's called additive solutions. So we don't look at what are called subtractive solutions, taking something away. If you think about it, when you're cooking, rather than not putting so much salt, people would say, add more of this or add more of that, rather than like less salt or less of something. In the case of global warming, a subtractive solution is to stop paying for global warming. India is subsidizing. I don't think we ever did the calculation for how much India subsidies in Indian rupees. What's 414 billion US dollars in Indian rupees? If someone could write that number in the chat, I think that might go into answering what you all can do in India. Like maybe let's look at why is India subsidizing fossil fuels for 414 billion US dollars per year. It's a big solution to subtract. And I think for solutions journalism, journalists could be doing a much better job of not just looking at additive solutions, but looking subtractively.
So then there's one question from Shailendra Yashwant on your point on adaptation again. I agree that we should take our eyes off mitigation. However, not take off adaptation is not a choice anymore for the global majority, especially the poorest and the most vulnerable in developing countries with zero capacity to cope with the back-to-back onslaught of climate-driven disasters. Newsrooms in South recognize that mitigation efforts should be the priority of the biggest Western emitters and theirs alone. More and more reporting naturally is focused on the need, finance, technologies, shared solutions to quickly adapt and survive. Your thoughts will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinesh. Thanks, Shailendra. I think we need to look at the effect of both mitigation and adaptation. If you reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you don't need to adapt as much. So mitigation is always an adaptation solution. The less you make the sea level rise, the less you need to build things to deal with that rising. So any newsroom focus that is drifting towards focusing on adaptation, I would question the extent to which that newsroom is financed by the coal industry. I would question that. I would question the role of large corporate media holders in owning these newsrooms and shaping editorial direction of newspaper writing and subsequently of reporters. I don't think that the decisions for what newspapers write about happen in a vacuum. Um, so yeah, I think we need to be focusing on mitigation and prevention. If we do both, we will have less support for both. We just know that that's the truth of the matter. I don't mean that we shouldn't be adapting. Cities are doing it all around the world anyway. I don't mean we shouldn't have money for that. But in terms of what our media focus is, I think it needs to be on the prevention of the problem. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have one question for Dr. Cornelia, especially on the issue of double literacy. And I know you kind of touched upon it, but I think just to bring that question back, or and what are the one or two concrete ways journalists can kind of build this into their everyday work, especially because I think the use of AI is also increasing in journalism. So I think just to bring that question back on double literacy and how to equip yourself better when it comes to reporting and using AI as a tool in everyday journalism.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the main point of double literacy really is the aspect that AI is one piece of the disinformation equation, but NI, natural intelligence, is the other piece. And we tend to forget that we are not perfect decision makers. Let's face that. We like to believe that we are rational in our thinking and in our action, but de facto we're not. And there's abundant literature showing that. So if any of you have not yet read Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, highly recommend it. You can read it 5 times and you will still fall prey to your own biases. But this kind of knowledge about our own way of thinking is now just obligatory, because otherwise those AI platforms and AI tools, they are configured to tap into all of our cognitive Achilles heels. So when I say double literacy, that means, yes, a solid understanding of AI, but not what's the latest prompt and how you can use it, but more understanding your natural cognitive equipment and understanding how much directly and indirectly AI is influencing it.
Thank you so much for that quick reflection. We do have 5 more minutes. If there are more questions from the audience, then there's some chat on the IMF numbers. I think, thank you, Grant, for sharing those links there for verification. Yeah, you want to show it? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just show really quickly because Murali had an interesting point. So the IMF calculates India's GDP at 5,000 billion, which is like 5 trillion, I understand. And then the 2026 fossil fuel subsidies are being listed at 562 billion for 2026, which they calculate at 11% of GDP. I put the links to all of this in the chat. This is not me, so no need to quote me on this. This is the IMF. I'm sure it'd be interesting if you all could look through their methods and all these kinds of things, but they're not exactly some kind of socialist, left-wing, ecologically friendly institution. So I wouldn't suspect any kind of bias of underreporting on the part of the IMF. I don't know if that answers your question, Murali, but I think you could direct your research towards them and you'll probably get the answers you're looking for.
Thank you, Grant, for that reflection and clarification as well. So just a closing question for me then, just to also kind of get both your reflections on this. So if journalism gets this whole issue of disinformation, the reality of disinformation that we're facing right now, if journalism gets it right and if it successfully navigates disinformation, what will change, and what does kind of better climate reporting actually unlock in terms of public understanding or policy making? So it's a very kind of meta question, but I thought just in terms of getting your closing thoughts from both of you. Dr. Cornelia, whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
For me, what will change is political will for action. And this is the tough thing. I think Shailendra just didn't touched on this a little bit. Editorial focus. Everybody at a newsroom has an editor. And that editor accounts to like a legal department. They have to account to all these different stakeholders, the owners of the newspapers or the magazines. And it's going to be tough to do something different than what they want. They're your boss. But if you can succeed in focusing on solutions that will lead to actual reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, that means the public will support those solutions more. Political will, as I said, is zero sum. It's difficult to build political will. And if we can keep people focused on things that actually matter, such as fossil fuel subsidies, a carbon tax, moratorium on new fossil fuel exploitation, we will then see reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, which is what we do need to see if we want a better future. So I think achieving focus and then shifting political will among the public and subsequently policymakers would be what we want to see.
Thank you, Grant. Dr. Cornelia?
Yep. I'm going to end on a bigger picture, because I think the question right now, in my sense, is something that goes beyond climate information and climate mis and disinformation. And it's really, really important that we are aware that all of us, we're part of this last analog generation. So we still have the luxury that our brain has to evolve against friction. And let's face it, the brain is a muscle. Use it or lose it. So none of us probably, or at least I did grow up without one of those friends in the pocket. Ergo, I still remember the phone number of my grandma when I was 5 years old. Today, I barely remember my own. Going to a new city. When did you last time use a paper map and challenged yourself? Google Maps is now our best friend. Now, these are isolated functions in the brain. But now this marvelous general purpose technology called ChatGPT, it is willingly taking over any kind of cognitive effort. Now, yes, that's very convenient, but I would argue that's really dangerous, because we like to walk the path of least resistance. Now, placing that in the context of mis and disinformation at scale, in abundance, constantly, you put two things together and it is a ticking time bomb. And if we place that in the context that Grant has been describing, then this is an equation that is far more than worrisome. That is a real emergency. And I think we have big interest as journalists to raise awareness on that, because sadly, the majority of people, they are just walking along that slope of agency decay. And that's not a bad thing. That's not judgment. That's just a fact. I mean, we just have all a lot to do. We are all constantly immersed into this 24/7 exposure to information. And we don't have the bandwidth to constantly be on our toes. But that means journalism today is one of the last strongholds of actually reliable, valuable information. So that means all of you are the last guardians of quality information. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for those closing thoughts. I think that was absolutely like a perfect conclusion to this session. And as I said, we would certainly be like useful to have dedicated deep dives on both these topics, because these, I think, especially for Grant's discussion, I think there was a lot more curiosity to look at the other slides. Because of less time, you had to run through them. So we will hopefully have sessions in the future on the same topic. But for today, I think I just wanted to thank you both so much on behalf of the Asian College of Journalism, and for those sharing your thoughts and your knowledge with us today. So the resources will be shared to all the attendees here. I think the resources that Dr. Cornelia and Dr. Grant have shared will be also shared on email. So and okay, thanks Grant for sharing the Canva link to your slide deck. And yep, thank you all, and thank you again, Dr. Cornelia and Dr. Grant.